Hi there, I am Sarah Jane Case, and I'm the host of your new favorite show, Enneagram and Coffee. This podcast is dedicated to discussing the beautiful and hard parts of being human. We discuss the Enneagram, a personality map that is taking over the world, for increased self-compassion, personal growth, and healthier relationships. Listen to Enneagram and Coffee on the iHeart app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy, a podcast where we deep dive into the writing of your favorite novels.
This season, we're exploring Sarah J. Maas's second installment in the Crescent City series. This is Jac.
And I'm Amy. This is part 2 of this week's episode, where we're discussing chapters 60 through 64 in House of Sky and Breath.
The views expressed by the hosts are entirely their own and in no way represent the thoughts or intentions of the original author.
This podcast is a discussion, shared to spark thought and conversation on the characters and themes of this novel.
The interpretations presented in this podcast are just a few of many possibilities. Listeners are encouraged to read along and share their own analysis of the text.
Though the hosts speak mostly within the constraints of this book, series and extended universe spoilers may be discussed with or without warning.
Explicit language as well as themes of sex, violence, abuse, depression, self-harm, and death will recur throughout this podcast. Listener discretion is advised.
If you are enjoying the podcast, check out our Patreon for more exclusive content. You can find us at patreon.com/Book Talk for Book Talk. Thank you to all our Patreon supporters, with a special shout out to our July 2024 Trophy Wives. Thank you Olivia, Anya, Fiction Fan, Shelby, Liv, Amber, Veronica, Anne, Jackie, Nicole, Emile, Jessica, Helen, Danica, Carissa, Colleen, Alexa, Sam, and Allison. To learn more about how to become a trophy wife, visit patreon.com/Book Talk for Book Talk. Thanks, trophy wives.
Okay, so now we're in chapter 62. And if SJM wanted us to support Ithan, then she should have tried harder. Yeah. So he's in the field with Hypaxia, and he thinks about what he's going to say to his brother, right? Because he thinks that he's about to see Connor. Quote, "I love you," would likely be the first thing that he would say to him. "I miss you every minute of every damn day" would be the second. Then the warning? Or should that be first? You're trying to contact him for the warning. I understand wanting to say "I love you" the first thing, and that's totally get that. But we're starting to see, not starting to see, we've known from the beginning, it's not necessarily about the warning, it's about Ithan trying to find closure.
Yeah, it's been a front the whole time, right? And quite frankly, a very weak reason for SJM to keep including Ithan in the plot.
If it was severe enough, Bryce would have done something for Danica.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
No, if it was truly something that I think it would have taken higher priority with Bryce.
Yeah.
Because if it hurts Connor, it's going to hurt Danica. Yeah. Even though Danica sacrificed herself.
Yeah.
But
Well, at the end of the day, this is important to no one but Ithan.
Mm-hmm.
This is Ethan's only reason to continue to remain in the story.
Yeah.
And it has been going on for 30 chapters now.
Mm-hmm.
That might be an exaggeration, but it's been a really fucking long time since they found out this information.
It's been a long time. He's had no drive, no purpose, except for this one thing of I really want to help my brother, or I want to talk to my brother,
or I want to go steal Sigrid. One of the two.
It's so she's just not giving me much to work with here in regards of Ithan.
So remember how I mentioned Jesus before?
Yeah. I've heard of him.
Good. I'm glad you've heard of him, so you have some context. Hypaxia and Ithan are in the Olive Grove, and while they try to summon Connor, the Underking appears instead and creates a maze of wards that they have to get out of while being threatened by scary things in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a very loose thread is being tied to Christ in the garden when he was suffering for humanity's sins.
Mm-hmm.
he's there. He doesn't want to be, or he says, please take this cut. Whatever. I don't know. It felt a lot. It actually feels like a different story of Christ, of him in the desert and being tempted by Satan.
It gives me what's one of the Greek mythology ones where they're trying to get out of a maze. Is it the Minotaur?
Theseus.
Yeah. Theseus. Yeah. It gives me Minotaur, maze, Theseus trying to get out. I mean, there's a lot of legend. There's a lot of stories, a lot of, things passed down about needing to get out of a place and being challenged at every turn.
Yeah. Anyway, that's all I had. I didn't really have a lot going on in this chapter.
So this scene in this moment is about Hypaxia's power. The Underking flat out says that he's there to test her.
Yeah.
And it basically leaves Ithan useless.
Yep.
Quote, Ethan's hand drifted towards his gun. It wouldn't do anything. His wolf form would protect him better with its speed. But even losing that split second to shifting might make him vulnerable. Ithan is caught between wolf and man, gun and claws, and both are not good enough. He's not good enough.
No, he's not.
And do you see what I mean, though, when I say that SJM has left? Like, when we first talk about this, about Hosab, a lot of people, and I was complaining about Ithan being prime, a lot of people were like, SJM left plenty of clues about him being prime. And I agree. There's a lot of clues about him being prime. But there hasn't been a single thing to show that he has power to be prime. Every turn, it's him not being strong enough.
Yeah, I mean, look at Bryce. She's kick-ass.
Yeah.
We never doubt her ability to rise to the status of princess or queen because she was kick-ass as human.
Even in her lowest points, she's still kick-ass.
There's nothing kick-ass about Ithan. He's a sniveling little boy the entire time.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's frustrating. We'll come back to them. At this point, though, Bryce is sleeping next to Hunt, and she has a dream of Apollyon, and he gives her a lot of info.
I mean, there's a lot of info dumping in this set of chapters. Now, at some point, everyone's going to have an info dump. It just so happens, I mean, I actually don't mind the Apollyon info dump. The information is not presented in a way that is problematic to me. We're going to see other scenes where it's problematic for me. I think you can't avoid info dumping sometimes. It's just so late in the book for more info to be dumped.
Yeah. No, the timing of this, and we're going to get into that talk, is so weird. But I get that, like, you're never going to not avoid info dumping, especially when someone's giving you information.
Yeah.
So that is true. But, like, it is info dumping, and that's what's happening in this. Like, an info dump is an info dump.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's the things that we learn during this info dump is that Thea was Aegis's great love, that Hell helped her. She helped Hell. And that they want Bryce to help, or that they want to help Bryce, and that no, we didn't send those Reapers after you. And oh, by the way, Hunt was made. There's a lot of things happening.
Yep.
So we're just going to keep going along. I do want to talk about how we find out that the Asteri removed Thea from the history books. And this happens all the freaking time. How about you just Google women being removed and erased from history, and you're going to find a long list. And then I was like, oh, that would actually make a really great podcast where once a week you talk about a new woman in history.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That would be really cool.
I don't want to do the work, but if someone wants to, like, write it for me, I'll read it.
I met someone recently, chief of staff to Laura Bush, who wrote a history of the first ladies of the United States because no one pays attention to them except to critique what they're wearing.
Yeah.
And no one actually pays attention to the fact that they do a lot of work behind the scenes.
There's a thing that's even called the Matilda effect because it also happens in science all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And, while the Matilda effect is like, often considered with scientists, this concept remains true everywhere, how the fact that women are often overlooked, not credited, and then just flat out dismissed. So that's like, I'm like, yeah, wouldn't that be a good idea? Like this week we cover a different historian.
That would be cool. I'm not, woman. I don't have time to do that research.
Neither of us have the time to do the research. I'll read it.
I did read somewhere that the word scientist was first used to describe a woman who was a physicist, chemist, and geologist.
So cool.
And there wasn't one word to describe. So, the only word at the time to use to describe those type of people were men of science. And she's like, well, I'm not a man, so I'm a scientist.
The chapter ends with Hypaxia getting her and Ithan out of the field. Quote, she crinkled her nose. Right. On foot it is. Ithan swallowed. I got your back? She chuckled. Just keep up, please. Another moment where Ithan, like, he's supposed to be protecting Hypaxia.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't, or he doesn't. But she does crack me up. I just imagine her being like slamming a book shut, like, all right, on foot.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yes. She does seem like off into the wilderness we go. I will hand it to SJM. The only good thing to come of this is that we see Hypaxia and Ithan interact a lot, and therefore it is not unusual for them to
in
be
the next book.
In the next book.
Yep, agreed.
We then move into chapter 63, and while the crew is together at the Ox Training Center, Bryce is practicing her teleporting because she's like, yay, I can do it, watch me. And Hunt makes sure everyone remembers that he has the best power to charge Bryce.
Yeah.
Because he is very... He's very much in yeah, I belong with her. She belongs with me. Yeah, I'm the best for her. Yeah.
All at the same time, though, Bryce is like, maybe I won't tell him about this bread comment.
I know. I'm like, oh, we're keeping secrets again. Okay.
Yay, like, because you could have told him in the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
First thing when you woke up. Why are we telling, like, it's not your information. Bryce in this section right now. It's like, this is all sorts of not your information to keep.
Yeah, it's not your information to withhold from the person it's actually about.
So it almost makes sense that this chapter starts off this way with her not telling Hunt when it's not your information to decide he doesn't get it.
Yep, I agree.
So a cute moment before both of our frustrations. Bryce is teleporting. She pinches Hunt's butt. She pokes Declan. She scares Ruhn. Quote, she appeared in front of Tharion's bench, but the mare was waiting. Fast as a striking shark, Tharion grabbed her face and planted a smacking kiss on her lips. Hunt's laugh boomed across the space, and Bryce joined him, batting the mare away. Two slow legs. It's cute. It's funny. We've referenced this scene a couple times in the past where we talk about like how Hunt's so not threatened.
Yeah.
By Tharion, and it's just cute.
This is one of those scenes where it is a cute moment. I wonder if it came first and was repurposed for this info dumping scene.
Oh.
Like, this was a scene that I could see SJM playing out in her head about, like, okay, I have to get here. And then she's like, okay, I'm finally here, but I have to resolve all these other things along with it. Can you tell I have a problem with this scene?
Tell me about it.
For whatever reason, Declan Emmett, hacker extraordinaire, who's usually at home hacking away, is here at this training sequence, and he's the one who is summarizing how Bryce's power works as if he were an authority.
Yeah.
It feels so out of place. Now, let me read this very long quote so that we can all feel out of place. Quote, your power came from the gate with a shit ton of first light mixed in. So your magic beyond the light, needs to be powered up. It relies on first light or any other form of energy it can get. You are literally a gate. You can take in power and offer it, but it seems the similarities end there. The gates can store power indefinitely, while yours clearly peters out after a while. And your power, Athalar, as pure energy, is able to draw from her like she did from the gate. Bryce, when you draw from a source, it's the same way the gates zap power from people using them to communicate. This feels like a moment where maybe an editor was like, you haven't fully explained how all the power's working. And then instead of putting more information in along the way, which honestly we as readers have deduced enough from all the action.
Didn't need to be explained.
It didn't need to be explained in this way. It was completely unnecessary.
No. I mean, yes, I'm agreeing with you because it wasn't necessary. Especially when, like, I feel like some of it was, like, already figured out. How, like, all you needed was Bryce saying, like, okay, so we know that I can do X, Y, and Z.
Right.
That's it. Like, we know my power works best with Hunt. Like, Hunt already says that.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, so we know that my power comes from this. Like,
right. And I think that's the other part that bothers me is what they should be deducing from action. Declan is speaking as if he has been experimenting on her and is speaking with fact.
Yeah.
And he's not presenting his deductions as deductions. And he's not even there for all of it. He's getting it all secondhand. It's really problematic from a writing point of view.
This whole scene and this whole episode is just, I wonder how much control SJM's editors really had in this process
Mm-hmm.
because of how weird timing this is,
Mm-hmm.
how we're getting a bunch of info that's about to be immediately resolved too.
Mm-hmm.
It was sprinkled in, but not sprinkled in, that like now it's like we need to put this all together and like, oh, by the way, here's all this stuff with Thea, and oh, by the way, but the hell's actually going to be on your side. Oh, but by the way, there's actually all this other things going on.
Yeah.
It's like not, I mean, if this is the kind of information that maybe you should have told us middle.
Yeah.
Or slightly earlier.
Yeah.
Sprinkle it out throughout, which
Mhm.
she kind of already did.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
now we have this, like, we have two info dumps, like, right on top of each other. And so this was getting me to think a little bit more about why this is, to explain to listeners why this isn't great.
Yeah.
You have beginning, middle, end. You
Yeah.
have conflict, you have resolution. Now, that starts to get difficult when you're trying to have a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And you're trying to bring people in. That's why second books is really hard. And why a lot of people struggle with second books is because you're really setting up for the third book.
Right. And this is true for movies too.
Mhm.
Most often there are exceptions,
Mm-hmm.
and we can name a couple. Most often second books are, here's the fallout from the first book, here's what you need to know to set up the third. Or
Yeah.
here's the fallout from the first movie, here's what you need to know for the third.
And I think the reason why I feel like this falls particularly flat for SJM is because, in my opinion, she mastered the second book with Mist and Fury.
Mm-hmm.
Because what was resolved was Rhys and Farah.
Yeah.
They got together. They had a whole ass arc. You have the beginning, middle, and end
Mm-hmm.
of their relationship. Their relationship doesn't need to evolve in the third book. They're together. Nothing
Mhm.
goes beyond that, right? But you're so wound up on that by the time you get the plot and that has a cliffhanger, you're okay with it because things have been resolved. And I
Yeah.
feel like I want to say almost very confidently that that's what SJM thought she was doing with Hunt and Bryce becoming mates and
Yeah.
getting married. Especially because just the chapter before this, they were like flat out, okay, we're married, we're husband, wife.
Mm-hmm.
And you're getting this effect of like, quote unquote, resolution. But what are we resolving?
Right.
There was nothing to resolve. They went from dating to married.
Yeah. And
That's okay. And
and we still have 200 pages of plot that's about to take place. Like that's not resolution-y enough.
no, there was nothing. I mean, yeah, even with Mist and Fury, they didn't even like, they got together, but it was still like, even like angsty. Like, she did such a good job with that relationship. And I
Mhm.
think she was relying on Hunt and Bryce's relationship being that
Resolution.
that like core story of book 2.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't. There's just nothing there for that. So, to pay it off, but for the payoff. But yeah, I agree. This part is where I don't know what the editorial process was like. And I don't know if people called her out enough for this. Or maybe the editor who read that, you know, the final ending was like so rocked by that it was like, okay, well, you know, we can forgive everything else because of how epic that ending is.
And I'm going to argue us as readers did the same.
I agree.
Everyone was so rocked by the ending of Sky and Breath. All they thought about were, what are the clues leading up to this? And that's a critique of us as well. I remember being frustrated with this book, but at the end of the day, all I thought about was, how is this connected?
I mean, I started this season saying this was my favorite book out of the 3 in this one, and I don't agree now.
Yeah.
I'm at a point where I'm reading this and the characters, I'm going to keep going into that too, some of them don't feel fully evolved for me.
Yeah.
Some of them feel very stagnant. Some of them feel like they're still in the same place. And if you want me to make this jump into third book, you know, I know we start this up like the season being like who they are in the first half of the book needs to be different by the time we get to the third. And while there's been some evolution to the characters, I don't want to dismiss that because I feel like this is bridging, but it's so convoluted that it's like with the analysis, it's losing me a lot more.
I completely agree. I mean, it makes me nervous to read Flame and Shadow because I think what we're seeing here is there are so many threads that require so much in terms of breadcrumbs, in terms of foreshadowing, in terms of establishment. There are too many characters.
Mm-hmm.
There are too many subplots.
Shahar and Hunt. Where does that go?
Right.
Yeah,
and the really important grounding things that
Mm-hmm.
mattered to us in book 1 and that still matter to us now, the resolution later, as I understand it in this moment, is not satisfactory.
Mm-hmm.
So
we'll talk more at the summary at the end. So I want to go into another thing I have an issue with this scene, and that's the way that Bryce handles Cormac. Like, we're all surprised that Cormac's there because Bryce, if you remember correctly, I'm going to tell you, she sprung the whole Hunt's my mate thing to him. That didn't need to happen. He could have been warned. Yeah. There is not a single, it wasn't, we needed your reaction. That was so unnecessary. And he tells her, Cormac tells Bryce, quote, I'm willing to move beyond this on the condition that you don't surprise me again. We have too many enemies as it is. How is that not an unrealistic thing to ask for?
I completely agree.
Okay, because the reason why we're frustrated is because the next quote, what Bryce says, quote, 1, don't give me conditions. But 2, she made a show of examining her bare arms. Nothing up my sleeves. No secrets to hide, I swear. Except for the fact that she's hiding Emile. And then Hunt knows that. Her word means nothing. The I swear
is hollow.
It's so hollow.
This is the moment where I'm like, I understand why people didn't like Bryce by the end of this book.
Yeah.
Cormac tells Bryce, you should have let me in on the plotting. And instead of Bryce saying, you would have stopped us, like you were a liability, we needed this to work. Instead, she's like, there was no plotting. Yeah. Athalar and I decided and then just waited. Excuse you, that is plotting.
That's plotting, and it just shows selfishness then.
Extreme selfishness.
To think that this doesn't include his life.
Right.
It's his dad. We've already established that his dad is a prick. Like,
right. And his excuse is twofold. One of it is for Ophion, the other is for his father. Like, his life in some ways is just as much at your stake, if not more. The
more that I analyze this book, the more in the scene, I'm like, Bryce caused his death. Like, she doesn't set him up to, he is not part of the club. He is not part of being valued and being, continuing for anything.
Yeah.
He's not respected. He's dismissed. And I know everyone chooses their own actions. I'm not saying that she killed him or anything like that, but it's very much.
But he becomes a consequence of her actions.
Absolutely. She doesn't treat him like a person.
Mm-hmm. And this is also a moment where I struggle with Hunt because, once again, because Hunt is in the club, he is on the team, and Bryce has shown him he's on the team. He doesn't have a problem.
Yeah, and I feel like he would have before.
Yeah, if we look at how he interacted with her at the start of the book, he would call her out for this kind of shit. Yeah. Instead, he's just like, you're a liar, but I know the secret, so it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's problematic.
Yeah. And then it's the denial about Emile. Like Bryce finally admits that Emile's gone. After a knife is to her throat, she still lies to him.
Yeah.
About it. And I'm going to say this thought before I keep going on this one because I just thought it. But like in this, so like he's holding a knife to her throat and Hunt's ready to go fight and Ruhn's ready to go fight. And then Bryce kind of talks Cormac down-ish and Hunt's proud of her.
Mm-hmm.
She talks him down with lies because Bryce tells him that he's gone, but she doesn't tell him where. Which is so stupid. He's with her fucking parents.
Yeah.
Do you think that, like, Cormac's not going to see that?
Yeah.
Do you think Ruhn's not going to visit your mom one day and suddenly be like, when did you get a brother?
Yep.
Or do you think that's why it was dumb to put him with her parents? If this whole thing of, like, no one's going to know where he is, wait till the holiday.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to know. Wait till you get a Christmas card.
Yep.
Cormac's seen Emile.
Yep.
He knows what he looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have also the fact that Emile was his mate's brother.
Yeah.
Emile was put into the care of Cormac. Bryce isn't wrong. Cormac's life isn't great for being able to raise a kid. He has every right to be a part of his life.
Yeah, and to be part of the decision.
Yeah.
To put him in the care of someone else who can keep him safer.
Yeah, and then like Bryce just gaslights him the whole time and it was like, you know that this isn't good for him. Like this wouldn't be a good choice for him. And he's like, and then because he says like, but Sophie wanted, and she's like, Sophie would have wanted Emile to be happy. And it's like, fuck, you don't know her.
Yeah. You never talk to her.
You never talk to her. You're assuming you know her because
she's human.
Because she's human.
Yeah.
Does Sophie want Emile to be happy? Yes. But what about her mate?
Yeah.
This episode has been hard.
It has been super hard. I want to go back to what you were saying about Hunt being proud of Bryce, because I feel like this moment, from Bryce's point of view, explains away what we're having trouble with, but it's not earned.
No.
From my point of view, and it's, again, unsatisfactory. Quote, there was something in the way Hunt said, Your Highness, that made Bryce realize that the expression on his face a moment before hadn't been pride in her manipulation. It had been pride in the way she diffused things without violence. Like he thought she might actually deserve the title she now bore. How is she supposed... That is not the deduction you make.
No.
There is nothing to show that that's the truth, except for Bryce telling us that that's what she thinks. We're going along with it because Hunt has previously thought of her as potentially being a queen.
In just the chapter before. Like, it wasn't even like, it's not like he's had enough time to drop hints. It's not like there's been enough, like, slight conversations. It's coming so out of nowhere for her.
Yeah, it's so out of nowhere. And I think what Bryce is doing is in character.
Yeah.
I think Hunt's reaction is in character.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
It doesn't, you have to make the connections. You have to make it, you have to earn it. You have to make the connections make sense.
Yeah.
And it's just a lot of trying to get there. And the things that this makes sense, and maybe, the thing is, I don't know what SJM wants us to feel. Are we supposed to look at this and feel icky? And kind of be like, wow, this is setting them up for like their real resolution, which will happen in book 3. You know what I mean? Like, is that what we're doing? Or are we supposed to be like, inspired by this? Because I'm not inspired. I'm annoyed.
Yeah. And maybe if we think about it, I'm trying to be objective because everyone can tell how annoyed we are.
Yeah.
If we compare it to the end of Flame and Shadow, Bryce and Hunt reveal the truth to all of Lunathian about the Asteri. Does that absolve them of lying and gaslighting other people along the way? I'm not quite sure. Does it show a 100% change on their part? I don't know. It's
really, I know a lot of people really care about Bryce. I've had messages, people been like, you guys are really hard on Bryce. I'm like, I know.
We're hard on everyone.
We're hard on everyone. No one's happy with us when we do seasons. But like, this is hard.
This is hard for someone that's supposed to be the hero that takes down the forces of evil.
Yeah.
Because she's not.
The relatable hero, too. She was supposed to be relatable in a way that Feyre and Aelin were not.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think in Earth and Blood she was.
Yeah, I agree.
In Sky and Breath, she has become less relatable. And maybe that's because she is more Fae than she was in Earth and Blood.
And that could be it.
And honestly, that's the only way for me to explain it away.
But does SJM know that's what she did?
I don't know.
And
At the end of the day, my problem is not actually with the characters. It's with how it is executed in the writing.
Completely. Agreed.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Tharion is at the meat market, and he's pretending to look for Emile, and he overhears this. Quote, I hear the bitch is already pregnant. Ephraim's been fucking her good. Tharion pushed aside his disgust at the crude words. He hated that word, bitch. How many times had it been thrown at his sister whenever she'd ventured above? So, Tharion, he respects women only if he respects the woman, the individual.
Yep. I thought you did a great job with that.
Thank you.
When I read that quote, I was like, when did he become a feminist? Oh, right. He never has been. The feminist died when his sister died.
Yeah. I mean, if even...
Here's
the thing. The feminist, he got with the River Queen's daughter before the sister died.
Yeah.
So he was never been a feminist. The thing is, he only cares about Bryce and Hypaxia and everything.
Even then, he's a misogynist sometimes.
Yeah, no, exactly. We find out, though, that this is like the moment where we find out that he slept with the shifter. This is the garden.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
He fucked the leopard shifter in the garden shadows. He'd enjoyed every second of it. From the 2 orgasms, she had 2. He might have walked away from the River Queen's daughter last night, but he hadn't told her that. Like, Yeah, this is me being like, I don't think he slept with anyone else. And I think like the absolute lack of respect for the princess is just, it's egregious.
Yeah, it's egregious. Now, I understand from a storytelling perspective that this is meant to symbolize Tharion's breaking point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have been seeing that pressure build.
And I think this was done well, as much as it's... Keep going, sorry.
As much as he's being really selfish, it works for his selfishness. It works that this is the breaking point, and this is how he chooses to act out at his breaking point.
I want the listener to know, we could be annoyed at someone's actions, but say, you know what, plot-wise, story-wise, this makes sense.
Yes, totally makes sense, especially if he's abstained for 10 years.
The time that SJM spent on his character, each scene was used wisely. And I think that's what it comes down to, is that all of it makes sense.
Yeah, except this scene, I have problems with it.
Okay, let's go into that one.
But before we get there, you know, despite Tharion having reached his breaking point, there is a question of, is he powerful now? Does he feel powerful? And having broken through that barrier, you know, he fucked the shifter, he pleasured her, but the next day he has, quote, earthquakes of nerves.
Yeah.
And that feels like a land problem, not a sea problem. Just
I
saying.
say that to someone. Sounds a lot like a land problem, not a sea problem.
Or a river problem, whatever.
Yeah. Immediately, he's like, okay, so I screwed up. I slept with someone else. The River Queen's going to be pissed. I can't get Emile. But you know what I can do is sell a woman, Ariadne.
Yeah.
So he thinks, quote, if they found out, wouldn't it be convenient to have a dragon to offer as an apology present? Would a dragon be perfect in lieu of Emile? It's the ownership of women, and it's like the control and pieces of his own life, like safety in his life, but like he's just new low. This is meant to be his new all-time low.
Yeah.
Is that he's at his breaking point, and you can't be at your breaking point if you're not at an all-time low.
Yeah, the low is lowing, and this is the height of his selfishness.
Yeah.
He doesn't care at all about the well-being of the dragon who ran away. Just how can he capture her and convince her if she can be bargained with, right? Yep. How can she be a tool for him to continue to guarantee his freedom? Because that's all he's concerned about. Now, let's remember that that's all he's concerned about as I dive into this next section.
All right, I'm putting my phone down, which has my notes on my phone, guys.
I'll let you know when it's your time.
Yeah, I want to just take this in.
Now, Tharion calls Flynn, of all people, to back him up as they approach the Viper Queen and Ariadne. Because who's the only person who would be motivated enough to find Ariadne and pay for her freedom if necessary?
Yeah, the person who we both suspect is her mate.
Exactly. Flynn.
Yeah.
I thought this moment was interesting before I jump into the Tharion part. Flynn judges Ariadne for fighting in the pit. While Ari responds, quote, "You threw me on guard duty. Is that any better than fighting in the pit? You sound like someone who's grown accustomed to his life being dull as dust." Now, if we remember, Ariadne is a dragon, which means she's probably a very, very old dragon based on what Jessica has given us clues about. And so I think we're getting a glimpse into her psyche. If she knew what real power was before it started to fade, because she's that old, it makes sense that she wouldn't accept the lowly position of guard duty.
Yeah.
Because she's like, I'm a fucking dragon.
Yeah.
I need something as majestic as me.
She needs to get the energy out.
Right. And kicking everybody's ass in the pit is way better than guarding a princess who's paranoid.
Yeah.
So I don't blame her. Tharion uses this time to try and talk to the Viper Queen in private and runs into the Harpy doing drugs. And all of a sudden, he feels very noble.
Yeah.
It's no longer about seizing the dragon for his own uses. Quote, he needed to know if and when Pippa and her Lightfall unit would make a move, even without the mech suit prototype. If he could save innocent lives in this city, he would.
It's so disconnected.
That's like
you can't talk
2
about
pages.
Going from slavery, like selling someone for your own gain.
Yeah.
To, but I'm worried about innocence.
Yeah. The question becomes, Harpy makes an offhanded comment about ripping him to shreds, like his sister was ripped to shreds. So now his sister is at the forefront of his mind. This scene is so confusing.
Yeah.
Because Tharion jumps back and forth between thinking, I need to secure Ariadne so that I can secure my freedom. Oh, but my sister was killed and I need to save Lunathian. Oh, but I need Ariadne to be safe. So maybe I can bargain with her. Oh, I guess that's equivalent to slavery, but I think my freedom's more important. And it just... And then the Viper Queen tips him off that his friends are in trouble. And he's like, oh no, this is like when my sister died. They must also be in trouble. It's very, very, very confusing.
It's very confusing. It was really hard to read. Not because I was struggling of like, this is so, like, this hurts to read, but more of like, I don't know.
The train of thought is not consistent.
It's not consistent. And either A, this is meant to represent how scattered and in, like, you know, he's all over the place. He's at his breaking point, and that could be the case. That could absolutely be the case.
That could be him under stress.
That could, you know, but because we keep having all these other issues, it's just like, where are we going with this? Like, yeah. This is totally me projecting. Please ignore this. But how much of, anyway. Yeah, I'm going to say it. I was just like letting the person skip ahead if they wanted. How much of SJM's own anxiety and trying to figure out how she's going to make this work
is coming through.
I
think so this is how this book is in my mind. Starting with Earth and Blood. She paved a really, really neat, tight layer of brick wall. Yeah. With interlocking bricks.
Yep.
That fit perfectly. And then we get to Sky and Breath, and she starts laying those bricks, and we get partway through, and some of the bricks aren't the right size anymore. And now that we're nearing the end and we're at the top of this wall, the bricks are disjointed. There are gaps. There's cement, you know. It's all cattywampus now.
Yeah.
And I recognize we don't need all the answers. I recognize that she's laying bricks for the future, but the foundation is shaky.
The foundation is getting very shaky right now. Flynn and Ari for life, though. I just pointing this out, you know, so that whenever we get this book in like 5 years, quote, the Fey Lord pointed to the dragon. We're not done here. Ariadne only watched the TV again, ignoring him. Flynn snarled, I'm coming back for you. Spare your high-handedness for someone who wants it, lordling. We'll see about that, sweetheart. Who else called someone sweetheart? Hunt and Bryce. So now we're with the Underking, and he's talking about how Erd used to be more than just a goddess, and, quote, Bryce feigned a yawn, earning an alarmed look from Ruhn. And we're just, at this point, like, analyzing too hard. I get it. But it's just, it feels like she's using the same arsenal in her weapons. Bryce, of like that yawn, like she's yawned so many times in this book. Do something different. You know, where she looks at her nails all the time. She yawns. She does, and this is like her strategy. This is like what she does. It's very on brand for her. But you know, this is just an exhausting thing to have to analyze this, because then everything is like, oh my god, like just do something different.
Yeah, you know, we're nearing the end of the book. We know we're past, or we're coming up on the 75% mark.
Yeah.
Bryce has gained more power. She also has become more fey. This feels like a very human thing for her to maintain this facade.
Yeah.
And I think we expect more from her at this point.
And that's what I feel. Like, it's like you've done this multiple times.
Yeah. She's a broken record at this point.
And especially when you have Hypaxia as a counterbalance to Bryce. Looking at this quote, the breeze around Hypaxia rose to a chill wind. She didn't deign to speak. Hypaxia's silence is such a good sign of strength, especially when you have Bryce, who overtalks, is the queen of bullshit, and you just have like a good balance between the two.
Yeah.
And maybe if we had more Hypaxia, we wouldn't have had this feeling about Bryce. I'm just saying.
I agree. I'm gonna argue, if SJM could rewrite this book, take out all of Ithan, replace it with Hypaxia's point of view.
Completely.
And I think the only reason why we don't have Hypaxia's point of view is because she wanted the shock of the queer factor.
Agreed. 100% agreed. And by doing that, you're sacrificing true value and growth for shock.
Yeah.
I think she could have still done shock, but early on.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Am I the only one who thinks the Underking is a surreal? And I apologize if Happy Hermit has done this before, if Chemical Rosie has done this.
No, the Underking is... Remember I told you the one time that I was like, the Underking is this thing from Throne of Glass? And then everyone else sent me a message saying it was the thing. And now I'd have to go through my the old Instagram messages, but it's a throne of glass. But keep going.
Okay, so this is why I think it.
Okay.
And I could continue to be wrong.
Yeah.
Or the throne of glass thing could also be a surreal.
No.
Okay. it just kept hitting me, and I'm going to read it, and I could be wrong, and everyone's just going to have to suffer through this couple minutes. So there are a bunch of different similarities, and I chose to go back to the first ACOTAR. I went back to ACOTAR chapter 14, the first sighting of the surreal, and I went to the first description of the Underking in chapter 29 of Sky and Breath, but it is repeated multiple times when we interact with the Underking. So first, the voice similarities. In chapter 29, quote, "When the Underking spoke, however, in a voice simultaneously ancient and youthful, but cold and dry." In ACOTAR chapter 14, quote, "Its voice was at once one and many, old and young, beautiful and grotesque." Then we have the clothing. In chapter 29, quote, "He stood at least 10 feet tall, robes of richest black velvet draping to the gravel." In ACOTAR chapter 14, the surreal is described as, quote, "tall, thin, veiled figure in dark, tattered robes," and he or they continue to get more robes from Feyre in the future. Then we get to the facial features. In chapter 29 and other chapters, it's reiterated that the Underking has milky, lidless eyes and a lipless mouth. It's also emphasized that he has 2 large brown teeth, like as in too big, not the number 2. In ACOTAR chapter 14, quote, "A face that looked like it had been crafted from dried, weather-worn bone. Its skin either forgotten or discarded, a lipless mouth, and 2 long teeth held by blackened gums, and eyes that were nothing more than swirling pits of milky white."
Maybe you're right. You could be right. You could be the right one.
It's just... Let's just say hypothetically.
Yeah. Can I Google something?
Yeah, go ahead.
No, keep going.
Hypothetically, let's say the Underking is a surreal. Does it matter? Probably not. Should it?
Probably not.
I don't know. Why include all of that connection? Is it only to tip us off that these worlds are connected?
Maybe. I'm trying to find it.
But I think a more important question is, if it is a surreal, and it's a surreal with powers that knows all things, are we convinced that the surreal would play along with the Asteri and the rebels?
I mean, we only have one serial, and the serial was amazing.
Yeah, it's true.
So it's hard for me to think, like, of course they would.
Yeah. No, I know it's a product of circumstance. I genuinely think it's a surreal.
All right, no, give me a second.
So I'm going to argue.
Okay, so real cat, Barrow White from Throne of Glass.
So in ACOTAR, there's a quote that I did not read, also from chapter 14, that focuses on the white of death, the white of when Feyre is describing the surreal. I choose to believe the surreal is also a Barrow White.
Okay,
I think they're all connected.
All right, see, you threw another one in the mix, and now I'm on board. But Barrow Whites don't know everything. Maybe they're like cousins.
Maybe they're distant relations.
Yeah.
Maybe the surreal evolved in Prythian. Maybe Prythian was its prime location.
Yeah. I like that more. Back to Hunt still seeing Bryce for more than what she is. or he's seeing her potential. He sees all of it. Quote, "Hunt held his mate's gaze, letting her see his approval, his encouragement. It's similar to the training, and like the more... he sees more in Bryce, and he keeps showing his approval, which is just going to keep charging her on, literally."
Yeah, I think it also makes it really confusing when we get to Flame and Shadow.
I mean, the torture of it all.
The torture of it all. But I can understand people overlooking the torture and being like, Hunt was so...
yeah.
It's supportive by the end of Sky and Breath.
No, I agree. Then we have Bryce, who teleports around the city, right? And she's trying to get a distraction because at this point, Ophian showed up at the temple, and the Underking's like, "Haha, y'all are gonna die." And so Bryce's like, "Let me buy us some time." So in this short amount of time, she goes to multiple different gates around the city, has time to download an app to change her voice, record the voice modification, and then blare that through the city to send for help.
Yeah.
And then she comes back.
Yeah. And then she teleports Hypaxia away and Ruhn away.
And can't for her and Hunt.
Right.
The app being like, because Hunt was like, that again is a note where I feel like I can hear the editor being like, wouldn't someone have recognized her voice?
Yeah.
And then being like, she used an app.
Yep. That was a quick fix. So I'm going to add to that in a moment of, I don't think there was enough time to do that.
Yeah.
But let's keep in mind there are a lot of things going on right now. Underking just revealed he's in cahoots with the rebels because, you know what? War and death means more food for him, so he's not opposed to causing chaos.
Yep.
Fine. Ruhn reveals to Hunt that Bryce could also be considered an heir, which catches Hunt off guard. Bryce is teleporting. She's throwing up. She makes references to being like overcooked meat. She says her brain is soup, just reminding us of her humanity and that she's not perfect. Fine, believable. But then everybody's out playing each other in this political game.
Yeah, I know.
The rebels show up, and then Pollux shows up, and then
but the Lydia's behind watching things,
and then Baxian shows up. So here's where the point where Baxian explains, as they're escaping, he had enough time to research the temple after hearing Bryce's announcement to find the hidden entrance.
Okay, I read that, and I'm choosing to believe that he researched that when he first came to the city. I think he says he researched it when he first came to the city.
No, he just said he researched it. There is no indication of time.
He's a historian? I know. It's hard.
My question is, does this feel high stakes or does it feel messy?
Can you give me your book? Please? Sorry. I mean, at this point.
Do you want me to find that?
Yeah, I just want to see it. I mean, I don't doubt you. I want to hear the whole...
Yeah. Let me read it. I heard Pollux give the order to come here over the radio. Given how pissed Pippa was after Idra, I figured it was you lot involved. I researched the history of this temple, found rumors about the door hidden in the throne. It's what took me some time, finding the tunnel entrance in. Some priestess must have used it recently, though. Her scent was all over the alley and fake wall that leads in here.
I just want to hide under a blanket? That's bad. That's bad.
It's impossible.
That's really bad.
Because it's not like he can winnow. He had to fly from wherever he was at.
And to discover tunnels that aren't known enough for Ophian or Pollux's crew.
But there are rumors about it online.
But there was some priestess, so he was able to smell her, which is why he was probably able to find it.
Yeah.
This is really, really hard to, like, we know she's a good writer. We know she's capable of all things. We've analyzed her stuff, but this is just a lot going on at a really...
Yeah.
I'm not saying I've reached my breaking point. I mean, obviously, I love SJM, but this is one of those... You take over.
Here's how I'm going to explain it away.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is the first time since Idra that we're like, oh shit, Bryce and Hunt are going to get caught.
Mm-hmm.
Pollux is in there killing rebels.
Mm-hmm.
The Hind is walking in. They're hiding behind an altar. Like, there is no way out. Like, we genuinely think that they're going to get caught.
Mm-hmm.
And then Baxian comes and saves the day, and we're so relieved. And we believe it because this is the fourth time he's done it or whatever. And then we get this piece of information. But you know what? We don't dwell on it because then we get the Danica reveal. And who cares about what happens in between?
It's literally, that's the whole thing of this book. We don't care the flaws of this book because we get the she's in Prithian reveal at the end.
Yep. And I feel like the Danica reveal, I've always felt the Danica reveal could have come earlier.
Yeah.
Baxian could have been part of the team earlier.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't necessary to save it until this moment.
You didn't need to be at odds with Baxian and Cormac.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you gain anything by having Baxian be this person that they've accepted isn't going to turn on him.
Right.
On them. You know what I mean? Like, you're not going... And then the reason why I'm throwing Cormac in there is this, like, we trust him but don't trust him.
Mm-hmm. And I think what this all boils down to is the fact that SJM has so many threads.
Yeah.
That some of them had to get tied up in this book. They couldn't wait until... There were too many threads to wait until Flame and Shadow.
Yeah.
And too many other things that are going to happen in Flame and Shadow that things like Cormac and Baxian had to resolve in this book. That Emile had to resolve in this book.
Emile, the whole Emile line lasted way too long.
The Emile plotline lasted too long. And there are a lot of things. And we talked about the structure of this book last episode. There are 2 things that were drawn too far out that didn't have to be.
Yeah.
And I genuinely believe if Ithan had not been part of this story.
Agreed.
A lot more could have been resolved more quickly.
You still could have had him as a character existing like Jac and Flynn.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I think he still could have done his struggle and growing off camera.
I completely agree.
I don't think you need to say that he's not going to be a part of Flame and Shadow or become Prime one day.
Yeah.
I think he could still go through a lot of his stuff, but like, yeah, a lot. Replace it with Hypaxia.
Yep.
You're losing a lot.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, as writers at the end of the day, I think what we learn from this is, and this is why I won't publish my fantasy book as it is.
Yeah.
There are too many characters. There are too many storylines.
I've been telling you about the fantasy book that I've had in my head, and I keep like going about it, and I almost about to like not even low-key, high-key name drop. I almost texted Kate Golden and just be like, how do you know these are the characters you're going to go into?
Mm-hmm.
Because I have these 2 and I have another 2, but then it's like, well, should I look into them? And they're good.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to get a little messy. And like right now, I'm so happy we had this one to analyze at this time, because I am so 100% being like, you know what? That answered that question.
Yeah. It's so funny you say that, because I was exchanging voice notes with Kate Golden.
Yeah.
And I was like, I was telling her, asking her, should I work on my fantasy novel? Should I work on my Pride and Prejudice retelling? And I talked about like, I need to rewrite the fantasy because there's too many characters.
Yeah.
And she said, that is 100% the thing you have to do if you're going to focus on a fantasy, is you have to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're not even at breadcrumbs. Okay. Here's the last note I had on this. Right as Baxian reveals why he's helping them, quote, he ran a finger down the brown skull of what seemed to be a fanged veneer and said, through love, all is possible. And I just like to think that we probably stroked Danica the same way on her head, on her forehead and stuff. It's sweet, but I have too many other emotions to think this is sweet anymore.
That's fair. That's fair. We'll talk about the Danica reveal next week.
Yeah.
Let's move on to some breadcrumbs.
All right. In chapter 60, Hunt, when watching Bryce interact with Hypaxia and talk down Celestina's fury, quote, another word formed on his tongue, but Hunt didn't let it take root, didn't let himself think of all the deadly implications that the other word would entail. That's Bryce being queen, but she's not queen yet. And it does have deadly implications for everyone, especially the Autumn King.
Especially him. In chapter 62, Apollyon is talking to Bryce, quote, I am telling you this because you are racing blind toward your doom. Well, that's foreboding and accurate.
Yeah. Also in chapter 62, quote, Orion was bred to be receptive to our kind. Why do you think he is so adept at hunting us? And how does Apollyon know all this?
Wink, wink.
Yeah, he bred him.
In chapter 64, Tharion sees the Harpy in the Viper Queen's space. Quote, this was the Viper Queen's space. Her word was law. He had as little authority over her as he did the Asteri. And if he pulled anything, she had as much authority as the Asteri to end him. Likely by throwing him into that fighting pit and seeing how many of her fighters it took to kill him. And yet he's going to choose to put himself there.
Mm-hmm. And finally, in chapter 64, the Underking is talking about Erd. Quote, I thought the Fae bowed to Luna, but perhaps you remember the old beliefs. From a time when Erd was not a goddess, but a force, winding between worlds, when she was a vat of life, mother to all, a secret language of the universe. The Fae worshipped her. Vat, that's a cauldron. Mother, we have like the mother from Prythian, all 3, Book of Breathings, like there's a lot.
Yeah. All right. Jacqueline.
I didn't realize that I'm answering, but I feel like we've answered this entire time. But
we
keep going.
We have. Has SJM reached the point of saturation in her storytelling? Is there such a thing as too much? And what makes us feel like we might have reached that point?
Yeah, I mean, it's too many characters. It's too many plots happening. It's too many things. It's too much cleverness.
I'm gonna argue something.
Okay, well, we've just established that we have similar opinions, but
no,
continue.
we do,
Okay.
but I'm gonna take it in a little bit of a different route.
Yeah.
I think SJM promised her publishers 3 books. I think she had enough content to do another Throne of Glass. I think she could have had 7 books. And I think she chose to cram everything into 3 books.
I don't doubt that her publisher would have eaten it up to have 7 of these. However, I think the idea of doing another Throne of Glass was probably overwhelming.
Yeah, and I think it was important to SJM to get to the Prithian reveal by book 2.
Yeah.
By the end of book 2. Because she had done a bunch of setup in Silver Flames. And because she wanted to be able to do whatever she did in Flame and Shadow to allow the Akatar story to continue.
Yeah. And
I think drawing it out further than 3 books would not have allowed her to continue the Akatar storyline.
I agree.
And I think that is the only reason why we are getting so much information in this book, and we're going to get so much information in the next book. And it's not going to I don't feel like it's cohesive right now.
It's not cohesive. I mean, and who knows, maybe we'll suddenly have different opinions in the next one. But when you have so many things happening, and that's why Bryce's character feels so frayed. So, like, remember I said, who she is, Bryce is at the end of book 1 needs to make sense for book 3. It makes sense because it's frayed.
Yeah.
Everything is scattered. Everything is all over the place. It's not a good thing, but it's cohesive.
Yeah. No, in that sense, I do think Sky and Breath so far has gotten us from the end of Earth and Blood to the start of Flame and Shadow. It does achieve that. The way it achieves it
is messy.
It's messy,
and it's just, especially since she took her time with Earth and Blood and really only focused on Bryce and Hunt with a pinch of Ruhn.
Yeah.
You don't benefit from getting more characters.
Yeah. I think we got enough of Ruhn in this book. I
agree.
I think Ruhn was the right balance.
I agree.
I don't think there was enough Hunt and Bryce. I don't know that Tharion was necessary, but it works.
Yeah.
Ethan could have been cut and should, in my mind, have been cut.
Absolutely.
The only reason why he wasn't cut is so that he could become Prime in the next book, which arguably is still questionable.
It's still questionable, and does it do anything?
I mean, we haven't read it to analyze it, and so I don't know.
But it also, we know that it doesn't, I can say though that it doesn't do anything because it's a lead off for his story.
Right.
And that's all that is. And you can still have done all these things in the back end.
It could have been a fucking novella.
Go make Frost and Starlight.
But make it about Tharion and Ethan.
That'd be great.
They did not need to be in these 2 books.
Yeah, I think Tharion's story is interesting. I'm okay removing it from here.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
It's hard.
So those are our feelings, guys.
Yeah, I will say, though, I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. We started this so that we could... We might have repeated this off camera.
You said this off camera.
Okay. We started this podcast so that you and I could be better writers.
Yeah.
This is... I don't want to say this is the first time I feel it now, but, this is the first time that, it's hitting me so hard on something that I'm currently thinking of.
Yeah. And
has been top of mind. And I really feel like I can, look at this and be like, you know what? I don't think this worked for her.
Yeah.
And be like, and that's how, as a writer, you're able to evolve.
Yeah. I learned so much from SJM when we analyzed just Court of Thorns and Roses, that first book.
Yes.
I learned so much in that first book. I learned, again, I think I learned a lot in Earth and Blood.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that those were positive learnings. I've learned this time something that doesn't work.
And those, what are the 2 things in those books? They were simple.
Yep.
Even though Earth and Blood was a behemoth.
Yeah. At the end of the day, the storyline was simple.
Yeah. I hope she doesn't listen to this.
You know what? I think she...
should.
I think she... It's not that she should. She's big enough and successful enough. She can do whatever she wants.
And that's, I mean, that's where I'm like, how much was her editor really a part of this? Because she's SJM. She can do whatever she wants.
Yeah. I do think that... I hope that as much as we've learned from this book...
She has
that she's learned from this series.
Yeah.
She had to rewrite Flame and Shadow. She didn't have to, she chose to.
Yeah.
And it wasn't well received.
Mm-hmm.
And to what extent is that the fandom not willing to accept it?
Yeah.
When it first is printed?
And
to what extent was it was a really fucking difficult thing to wrap up because there were so many threats.
And how much of the fact that we're not getting the next ACOTAR book anytime soon. We haven't even had a release
or a
announcement or anything.
Yeah.
We haven't even had
we don't even know the title.
No, we don't even have the soft
launch.
Soft copy of Flame and Shadow. We only have hardback.
Oh, that's true. That is a good point.
Like normally in the past she'll announce the soft cover, is that what it's called? Paperback, thank you. I'm like there's a real word for this. Normally she'll do the paperback followed with an announcement, and we haven't had that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that she is using that time to really think about what she won and would have done different in this series so far.
Yeah, I really do hope that she takes this time to reflect. I hope that, because I'm taking this time to reflect.
Every writer, every author should take time to reflect on their series.
Yeah.
That's not an SJM, us being like, you should take time to reflect. It's like,
no, it's every
whenever
author.
Whenever I write a book, I'm going to take time to reflect. If I, one day when I write a whole fantasy series, I'm done with it and be like, all right, well, here's what I would have done differently.
Yeah, I think here's what I did well. Here's what I would have rewritten. How can I avoid those problems in the future?
And as much as we don't want to have fans dictate what we write, I'm imagining SJM and the legions of future readers I'll have. But as much as you should be able to don't let the Goodreads reviews sway you, but also hear the notes.
Yeah, where there's legitimate notes.
Yeah.
It's worth paying attention to that.
Absolutely.
I mean, and this is a struggle in a small setting, in a writer's workshop, whether or not those people are your friends.
Yeah,
in a class at school, or with friends or with people you don't know. It's hard to hear notes.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is noise, but some of it is genuinely worth listening to.
Yeah. So if someone can send this to her. You kind of gasped. You looked at me so scared,
We already think we're on the blacklist. It's fine.
I feel like we already know we're on the blacklist.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Book Talk for Book Talk with Jac and Amy. We encourage you to rate and subscribe to our show on your preferred podcast listening platform. Next week, we will be exploring chapters 65 through 71 of House of Sky and Breath.
We would love to hear your thoughts based on today's conversation. You can submit your comments to our forum at booktalkforbooktalk.com for a chance to have your feedback discussed during a future mini episode or on a Patreon exclusive episode.
If you are enjoying the podcast, please visit our website, booktalkforbooktalk.com, to view our latest merch and learn about supporting the show through Patreon or Venmo. You can follow us on TikTok or Instagram at the handle booktalkforbooktalk.
You ready? Bye. If anyone's wondering, we record all the intros and outros at the same time. So we still have the giggles from earlier this week.
Bye.
Nailed it.
Good luck, future you.
Just keeping it all in.